Casual observers of your music would probably label you as someone who grew up on a diet of 60s music, but I believe that's not totally the case with you.
That's true, actually. I mean, I liked the Beatles or the Beach Boys, and I had some of their records, especially the Beatles when I was younger, because my older brother had them. I think my parents maybe had one, a Beatles record. So, and I know they had like the soundtrack, like Help, I think we had in our house. So I kind of knew about them, but when I was a teenager and first buying records, by the time I was in, 7th, 8th, ninth grade, I really listened to a lot of the kind of English invasion, new wave stuff, the poppier stuff like the Buzzcocks and Elvis Costello and Nick Lowe and stuff like that. Before that, for really a much shorter time, I was really into prog rock, because like that's what the kids sort of 3 years older than me sort of listened to. So I kind of got turned on to that when I was maybe, 11 or something like that. And so I learned a lot of stuff off Yes records. Like they were my favorite one, I guess, because they were really melodic, sort of, and so I learned to play bass, sort of playing with those records. But once I was like really becoming a teenager, it was mostly that English stuff, and then discovering American stuff as I got later in high school that I related to, like more like stuff like the DBs and Let's Active and REM and all that kind of stuff, was just coming up as I was finishing high school.
So was there a defining moment for you when you decided music was going to be your career option?
It's funny. I think that I thought that pretty early, because I thought I'm learning to play bass. I know I could do like sessions or whatever, and so I kind of thought I could be a session guy on bass. That was really as far as I, would have sort of like made any claim I could be in the music business. Writing songs and recording myself was more like secret to me. It was really like the most ultra embarrassing and scary thing. So I think the bass was good because I played with other people, early on a lot, because I was like the bass player, and that was I think good, because once I started writing songs, I became really kind of alone again and didn't do a lot of playing with other people until really girlfriend kind of time,
Yeah. Talk us through some of your early bands there before you became a solo artist. Is there a musical connection to be seen between those bands and the music you ended up making?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I was in, sort of new wave cover bands when I was in high school, where we would play, songs by various groups of the time that were sort of happening. And, the cool ones were like The Jam, or I'm trying to think what else I learned like through that, like Generation X and all these kind of things that were, again, they're sort of poppy, but they're really cool and sort of simple, So that's the first stuff I was kind of into. Then when I moved to Athens, Georgia, when I went to college there in 1984, I felt like Athens had a sound. It was this weird sort of Egyptian kind of single note sort of half-steppy thing that was really interesting to me. Like I only really knew the B-52s, and then REM had started happening then. So I kind of went there, and I did this thing called The Buzz of Delight, and it was stuff that I wrote, and the group was myself and a guy named David Pierce, who also played in the very first records of a group called OOK, and I played with them later with David. I sort of played, real simple guitar stuff with them. So I was in these groups in Athens, and I felt like, for whatever reason, that was comfortable for me to sort of be in that style range of there. But once I really got back to making multi-tracks of my own, then I was a little more different. But I do think there's something, in a weird way, it almost resonates most with sort of progressive stuff to me, because Athens was just sort of, it did its own kind of thing, and I thought that was very cool. Even lately, like, it's funny, because I was just thinking about the B-52s the other day, and how really unique they were. I mean, like, the whole way they did music, but also just the music itself is really unique, It's like there wouldn't be another B-52, you know what I mean? And so that sort of stuff about Athens I really admired. People playing, guitars with 5 strings on them, and all kinds of. They would just kind of do anything. It was like an art community mixing with a sort of music community.
Was it a welcoming musical scene there in Athens when you got there? Did you feel part of it straight away?
I mean, again, I don't know if I would have said I feel part of something, because I don't know if I even understood what that was then. You know what I mean? But as a teenager, when I first went, it was great because I had met Jefferson, the manager of REM, and Michael Stipe, because I had their like 45. I ordered from a store from like New York Rocker or something. I'd heard kind of I knew it had something to do with Mitch Easter or the DVDs or something. So I got this 45, and Radio Free Europe sounded sort of English to me. It was okay, but like the other side, Sitting Still, was the one that, like, something about it, I just really liked it, And so that kind of got me interested in REM, and I went and saw them play at this local club when I was, I guess, probably 10th, maybe 11th grade, year before last year of high school. And, there weren't that many people, so they were totally, like, hanging out. And I played at that club as I was a teenager, so it was a comfortable place for me. And I ended up getting them to sign my 45, and they're like, do you want to come next door to the, Mexican restaurant or whatever? So I went over there with them, and I kind of quizzed them all about Mitch Easter, because I was really interested about him. He hadn't done that much. This was pre the name Let's Active, I think. He had done some stuff on some compilation I had. So they were like, oh, my God, you know about Mitch Easter, And so they put me in touch with Mitch, and Mitch sent me songs he did and stuff. So Mitch was really very influential on me because I just related to, he did pop, but it was real unusual,
Yeah.
And so I kind of knew those guys, and I sent them tapes I was making to, the REM guys, and eventually to the girls in OK, because they wrote me postcards. Like, they were all real friendly. Yeah, they wrote postcards and stuff. So when I got out of high school, I moved there, and I think mostly I was just kind of under the radar there until I got a deal with in, I guess, 1980, early 85. I did a deal with Columbia in New York. It was sort of like a development deal where I was going to move to New York, and they were going to get me, better home recording equipment or whatever. And if it all went great, I'd make a record, next year or whatever. And I think when that happened is when I first started to feel like really weird backlash. Like, I literally would have people come up and go, you should go out and tour and build your audience like REM. Like, just sort of like weirdly, like, why are you thinking about that? About me, But, so, I don't know, like, more after I was there, I got this vibe of sort of like people were really judgmental and weird about it. But not when I was there. And the people that I knew when I was there were, like, super nice, and I still occasionally see them. But, like, the guys from REM, Mike Mills I see, and we get along great, So I don't think that there was really, but, it's that time of your life where I guess you'd worry about it. But my mind was really on music when I was there. I really didn't, I socialized a little bit kind of that first year because I just didn't know anybody, But yeah. I went there alone. But I think then, I had a girlfriend, and we lived together, and it was sort of like I didn't do nearly as much of that stuff, because then I just kind of worked on music all day and did really poorly in college.
Now, you had that deal with Columbia, and then soon after with A&M, but nothing long term with either of them. Was it unsettling at the time, not being able to settle with one label?
Well, the thing is, in the beginning, like when I made the record for Columbia, I mean, I just didn't even know what it would mean to have fans, I really just wanted to, like, listen to, work in studios with real stuff, and I just kind of couldn't make that connection that, like, I have to be a performer as well as, like, make music, because I just had never had to be, really, I'd done most of my creative stuff just on tape. But I got to know Steve Robofsky, the guy who signed me at Columbia, by right around when my record was coming out there. He left to go to A&M, but then they kind of held his contract so he couldn't do anything until like 2 years later or something. So when I left Columbia, I remember that was traumatic for me, because it was just kind of like, wow, will anything ever happen again, But amazingly, Steve, it's funny because I remember this guy, Anton Fear, really great guy, who's the drummer from the Golden Palominos, really the creator of it. And he, at the time, I remember sort of consoling me, like, don't worry about it. He gave me some shoes, like some sandals. He was really great to me. Anyway, so then I waited quite some time, but Steve did take me to A&M like he said he would a couple of years later or whatever. So finally I was at A&M and making a record. And there I had somebody who kind of saw something I might have, of my own, I think, this girl, Karen Glauber. And she did a lot of stuff in the business all over the years. And her last thing I know of her doing is like sort of radio, I don't know what you would call them, like periodicals or whatever. She was very involved with finding young bands and doing that kind of thing. I imagine she still does it to some capacity. I haven't talked to her in a while. But she was sort of like the person handling me at A&M, and she was into, like, Peter Holsapple and Robin Hitchcock and, like, these people that I liked. So she's sort of like, yeah, I get it more, And so I made a record for them that was, I think, a more whole kind of thing than the first record, which was more kind of just exploring lots of styles and ways of doing it. The second record was sort of more whole, but it came out and didn't really do too much. I did a little bit of promo for it. But they did say, let's make another record. So that's really where I made Girlfriend before then Steve left and they were bought by Polygram and the record was sort of sitting in limbo. So eventually we sold it for $10,000 to Zoo Entertainment. And eventually I guess they had to pay A&M for the actual cost of the record, which was way, way, way more.
Now the Girlfriend album,
Girlfriend was the one that sat, people liked it, and it kind of got around in this sort of younger A&R community, which was really cool. And those people, I think, were also real taste makers in that era, and it's probably a different way than it works now. I don't really know. But that, I think, helped in a way that it sort of stewed around for 9 months, but people copied it, I guess without the Internet, there was so much more magic if you found something like people didn't have, because it was like everyone didn't have it.
Did you always have a confidence, though, in that album that was going to be the one to break through for you?
No, not at all, no. I knew that I liked it the best. I knew that I felt like this really feels like what I want to be or whatever, And I made it with friends of mine, and it was we all kind of knew what we thought was cool, So I felt really good about the record, which is why it was almost, so horrible that it was like, and this will be the one who doesn't come out, And so it's pretty cool. I guess maybe having that story of how it almost was lost sort of helped in the story of, once I had to do 1 million interviews. But no, I didn't think of it commercially at all. My manager, Russell, thought the song Girlfriend could be on rock radio. And I remember I even thought that was sort of a stretch. I'm like, okay, if you think so, man. And he pushed it that way. And even though we did this little deal at a little label, he pushed for putting out Girlfriend to rock radio, which eventually they did, and it really made the record happen with that and the video on MTV at the time.
Yeah.
It was other people saw really what could be done with it. Go ahead and ask more questions, because you see I'll ramble forever.
There's always been a great sense of melody in your work. It's been always a standout thing. Is that an instinctive thing, or is it something you really have to work towards?
I think it's instinctive. It's probably the thing I have to work the least towards. It's more about just finding that inspiration to kind of go at something and getting in that feeling. I mean, it's so much easier now for me to understand making music and the artistic process and all of that than it was back in the days where I first had success, because first of all, I had no time, and there was tons of pressure, and I just had to talk to people all the time, and it just made me not want to, be me, this weird kind of way. I learned to do it, and I kind of got out all my angst through doing shows. So we did these, kind of crazy loud shows where I was out of my mind and drank a lot and stuff, But always, I really was drawn to melodic music. I always liked there to be a tune. That's why I liked things like the Beatles, or the Beach Boys, and I really went back to all that stuff, another generation further back to where all those things were when I was kind of 20, 21, when I got to Athens and then moved to New York. It was then that I got into older things. People turned me on to them. Like Pete Buck gave me Pet Sounds. He said, "You got to check out this. This is a great, great record." And I must have had like Endless Summer, the compilation or something when I was 12 or whatever.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know from the cool viewpoint or anything. And so I had that record. I really liked it, and I had some. I started to discover other stuff from that era, the Byrds more, and where am I going with this? Guide me.
The instinct of melody.
Yeah, I think that I looked for that even when I went further back. My favorite guys are like, John Lennon or Neil Young or whatever. I like them to have all sides of feelings. You know what I mean? Like Paul McCartney can't quite do it all for me. You know what I mean? The way like Lennon could, because he could do something so touching and beautiful and just a simple sort of feeling, and he could also, get nasty or whatever, and that always seemed important to me. Like if I have a million like ballads or something, I need other stuff too. That's more than I think I ever thought about. As much as I ever thought about it was just making sure there was a balance of stuff.
Yeah.
I think I still kind of lean toward that, but I stray from being very melodic. If it's something I feel like doing, I just kind of don't think about it. But I love melodies.
The power pop label is one that most lazy journalists will reach for when they're describing your music. Does that sit comfortably with you?
It does. I mean, I can't believe to be included in anything where somebody thinks I fit is really great. That's even during like the time Girlfriend had success. I couldn't see it like that. Like I fit with any groups I loved. I felt more like the only one guy that was out until like Beck or something. We were really different. But I mean during that little period. But I think it's great. I mean I love so many power pop groups. First of all, from Cheap Trick and the Raspberries and to people like the DBs or even Alex Chilton, Big Star, I think of being that. I mean, that's who I left out a little bit, because Big Star, when I started making tapes, when I was in high school and making multi-tracks and trying to write kind of the last couple of years of high school, somebody turned me on. They knew I liked Mitch Easter, and they turned me on to Big Star. So I actually got into that Big Star stuff when I was sort of a senior in high school, so I guess that's 82, 83. And so I did have that. I really related to that because it was like American, and it was very honest kind of music. You know what I mean? He's like saying what he thinks, sort of, no matter whether it's oblique or whatever. And I felt really akin to that. That was like the greatest music I'd found to me, even including the Beatles, up to that time, because I really related to it. So I guess I learned about that through that all the DBs and Mitch and those people knew about Chilton and loved him,
Yeah.
And it was really quite a bit later, because I'm talking about 1982 or 3, maybe 1993 or 4, I think is when Bud Scapa, who was instrumental in my signing at Zoo, he did a whole reunion thing with Alex and kind of put Big Star back on the map to receive their due, So that was kind of a cool thing that happened there.
Absolutely. I remember interviewing Richard Lloyd once, and he cited working with you as one of his more enjoyable experiences in music. And I get the impression that even though you're a solo performer, you really do thrive. You're a bit of a team player, and you do thrive on the collaborative process with other musicians. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair comment. I think of myself as like the easiest boss, because like I won't make you learn it right. Exactly, You're ready to take a go at it. I mean, with things like Richard, where it's very exploratory, I just never wanted anyone to feel uptight because I feel really uptight on the spot, so I'm like sensitive to it. I want everybody else to feel like I would want to feel, So I think with Richard and with most people I've worked with, it's just been go for it because they add their whole other thing. I've tried to get people that sort of have that, not just someone for the heck of it to play guitar, but someone who has a special thing that I know it will delight me,
Yeah.
And so, guys like Greg Lease or Richard and, Rick, who has played drums with me forever, Rick Mink, it's like, it's a very natural thing. I mean, in the past, I think if there was something I could get someone else to play, but I just kind of knew what I wanted, I would just play it. I think now I'm even more interested in like what would happen with multiple people, even because I guess that's just it sounds so exciting now when stuff is sort of off the main grid.
Yeah. You recorded your last album at home, which is obviously would have great advantages in terms of cost and not having to worry about the pressures of time. But was there anything you did miss about the traditional recording studio environment?
It's just so funny you're asking this too, because I was just earlier today, I was thinking, I just don't even miss those big studios. And I wasn't thinking about our interview. I didn't even know what even made me think of that. I think I was literally watching like a cat in our house, and he was doing what we call playing the cello when they're cleaning and they have the one leg way up.
Yeah.
And I thought cello, and then I thought of the studio cello, which is sort of my favorite studio in LA. And I think it's still going. I think they have new ownership, but I don't really miss it. I don't know. It's like I don't know why I don't. I mean, the awesome thing about working in studios, you have this crew of people. I guess sort of more like they have like making a movie where you're in the hole together doing the thing, and you do develop like a crazy sort of humor and but we would work all night and just really it wasn't probably the most economical way to work, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The sad thing is, like everything else, we can't make money really from making records very easily, and now studios can't make money that easily. Although, the few great ones stay in demand for the few big artists that can afford it, And people go in for a day to record drums or that kind of thing. I mean, like I have a program, a reverb called Altaverb in Pro Tools, and I have the kind of my favorite things from cello were these chambers that they built for reverb that had been there, Brian Wilson used them on everything,
Yep.
on Pet Townsend before, and it's a particular one of them, I can't remember, there's two of them I think I like, but I have, like, I can turn on that, cello, chamber number 2 in this reverb program, like they have it sort of sampled from in there or whatever. And it's amazing how much some of those things can capture it. Like, it really gives me that chamber. So maybe I feel a little better that I have some of that ability,
Yeah.
And we now have software that really can sound a little bit more like magnetic tape and kind of just give a little bit more of that old, warm, familiar thing. I just made a new album, and speaking of, like, sound quality in studios and everything, where we mastered it onto to an old Neumann lathe, made a vinyl master,
Oh, wow.
and then re-recorded the vinyl master, and it is insane what the vinyl sounds like.
Oh.
It does a really cool thing I kind of never realized. Like, I think I mixed up the sound of vinyl with the sound of magnetic tape, because vinyl does a thing to whatever you give it that is just insane. Like, it makes the drums kind of pop out in this really dynamic way. And I always thought, well, it won't be as bright or something on vinyl, because back when I played vinyl as a kid, I just always turned up the treble all the way. It was probably just shitty speakers or whatever. But this sounded amazing. We ended up doing my whole record that way, so it has this kind of special went to vinyl master and came back thing.
Oh, what a great idea. Looking forward to hearing that.
I wish I could give it to you today. I'm really, like, just trying to give it to people I know that might like it, enjoy it that way. We got to figure out kind of how to put it out. But
you've dabbled a little bit in production of other bands in recent times. Is that something you'd like to take further?
I would like to. I don't know. how great I am at it. You know what I mean? I always feel like I get sort of more attached to it than I should. You know what I mean? Like it's a little too close to me, you know. But I like doing it. I especially like doing it with people I know, like, you know, doing it with the Bangles and with Sue and those people is really easy, you know, like we just get along and it's cool. I would like to do more, but it's not the easiest thing for me, but it's a thing that, like, I'm into doing it enough that if I like something, I would do it probably, you know.
Talking about your...
I don't do a lot of stuff. Not much stuff comes to me, really.
Talking about your Under the Covers collaborations with Susanna Hoffs, there's been a fascinating cross-section of songs on those two albums, and some time-honoured classics and some really obscure ones as well. Was it your intent to have that mix right from the start?
You know, it's not so much we had an intent to have that mix, but we went, we can't care if something's like too big or not, or whatever, you know, if it's like cool or not, if we want to try it, you know. And what I mean is, like, it could be some, you know, we can do a silly song if we want to, you know, but we didn't like try to, or we can do a really well-known song if we want to, but we didn't try to like only not do them. So it kind of was generally just stuff we came up with, and finding things we both knew, kind of, you know, tended to help. Like, we really mostly did things where we both heard them before and we went, yeah, let's do that song. Or one of us went, will you do this one with me? And we're like, yeah. So it was very not thought out. We recorded way over the amount for the 70s one, and we thought initially they were going to make a double album and make vinyl of it and all this stuff, but by the end we had to get it down to 16 songs from our like 40 songs or whatever.
Is there going to be a continuation of that series?
We are going to start on some 80s. I think it's going to be Shout. I don't know if it's like for sure yet, but we're making an 80s one and hoping they'll put it out with the other two, you know.
Has interpreting the works of other people in projects like that helped you in interpreting some of your older material yourself?
I don't know about interpreting my older material. I think that just as a person if you're playing lots of parts on instruments and having to listen to those records, like, and you're figuring out what people did on them, is sort of, in a subconscious way, I feel like it must be really educational. I think one of the really cool things of listening to old records is a lot of them have a seat of their pants thing going on, you know, by the seat of their pants, like, there's something wacky going on, there's some things that go on that, like, just wouldn't go on now, you know. Yeah. So it's always wonderful to hear, like, people being sort of human and making the best of weird things and stuff, you know. That's one side of it. It's also just kind of amazing how simple it all really is if you just figure out, like, how does the bass go, how does the guitar go. I mean, it really does make all kinds of music sort of fit together in a strange way, you know. So I don't know. I think just having to listen for my ear, the amount of engineering I've had to do for the records, hearing where you put vocals. I mean, we tend to make the vocals really loud because that's more what Sue's used to, and they're kind of vocal records, you know, just sort of like sing-along records is how we think of them, more like a campfire thing, so we don't have to be claiming any great seriousness, you know. Yeah. So, I don't know, I must have answered that question.
Tell us about your association with Shout Factory. It seems to be a happy fit for you.
It's been a great place for me. Originally, we went there through Sean Amos, who was our A&R guy for that first covers record. He eventually left to work on in some web content stuff, although we've stayed in touch. He's, like, amazing. But, yeah, I mean, it worked out amazingly that we did this Sid and Susie. We couldn't believe we were going to do a second one. In the meantime, they put out